We got a minute, according to that clock. What's that? You ready? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Beach Management Advisory Committee meeting. Where's my agenda? I don't have one. Thank you.
Do we have enough people?
5 of 9 you do. 5 of 9 members you do.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a quorum. Do we have any comments? Does the public have any comments on our agenda? Does anybody want to introduce themselves or say anything?
I think we have a gentleman.
Okay. Do you want to step on it forward and?
No, I'm just getting on the name of
Oh, okay. All right, next item is the approval of the minutes. We need a motion for that. Anybody?
So moved.
Maurice?
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. All right, Matt, do you want to give us an update?
Sure. Y'all hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Never understood that button.
yeah, mine was on.
Hear me all right? Okay. Well, just a brief update. A couple weeks ago, we had our beach workshop here at the annex. We had a decent turnout, about a half a dozen, 10 folks show up to really talk about our post-storm recovery plan, our beach management plan, mainly from a coastal restoration perspective, not necessarily code enforcement, but beach management as in sand on the beach type management. Solicited the public's input, gave a brief history of where we have been with past beach restoration projects, the HSDR project, where we are today, and then how we are still in need of a comprehensive plan on how we are going to manage the Walton County shorelines, and also how we respond following a major storm event. So there were some pretty good ideas that had come up out of the meeting. We all know the big issues with the HSDR project. It was, property rights was the biggest one, the 50-year easement, as well as the erosion control line. There was some discussion on perhaps we can go back to the state and see if those lands seaward of the ECL could potentially be leased by property owners or property managers. We're researching that. The sand quality was also an issue. We're looking at ways to address that, perhaps going out taking some more core samples in the Barrow area. Whether the Barrow area is used for a large-scale beach restoration project or a large-scale dune restoration project, it is a significant resource out there, and addressing the comfort level of the locals and the general public, I think that would go a long way to take some additional samples. Should we get a major storm event, I don't think we're going to find any upland sand source large enough to address what sort of coastal management strategy we may have. So keeping that Barrow site accessible is going to be pretty important. And then also the costs. So what our plan is we're taking all that information, we're compiling it into a report. Hopefully in the next 30 days or so, we'll have something. We'll release a draft to the Beach Management Committee. We'll do a presentation to the TDC as well. That'll include our recommendations moving forward, obtain the DEP and the Corps permit for a county-wide beach restoration project with the sole intent of putting that on the shelf, kind of like what we've been talking about for months now. Perhaps doing some additional sand sampling, the results we come up with from the state, those discussions with how to better address, if it is possible, with the erosion control line issues, and then also some data management. We need to have good data in order to make good decisions. So recommendations regarding the county and the TDC going out and collecting annual or every 2-year beach profile data, so we can see, which areas of the county are eroding more rapidly than others, which areas are doing fine. we can't really make good strategy and management decisions unless we have good data. So having all of that compiled into one report should be a very nice asset for the county. Again, we're working on it as we speak, so you should hear some updates from that in the near future. And then the other item I had was the HSDR project. We had discussed this a couple meetings ago. It was tabled, I think, in March of 2016. It's been a good little while now. The Corps of Engineers is getting nervous about holding those funds that were previously committed by the county. So they're looking to return those monies back to the TDC. It's somewhere on the order of $40,000 is the budget that's remaining, the county's portion over there at the Corps right now. So at the time we push forward the coastal management report. I'm not exactly sure what the title of that is, but when we push forward that report, at the same time we make the presentations to the TDC and the BCC, we'll also discuss shifting the HSDR project over to an inactive status with the Corps of Engineers and the federal government. That way those funds that are encumbered on the federal side can be shifted over to other projects that the Corps of Engineers is working on. That's the ultimate intent. They want to be able to release those funds and put them to where they can spend them this fiscal or shortly thereafter. So all things we've been talking about for quite some time, but should be all coming to a head here within the next 30, 45, 60 days or so. So if y'all have any input, or at the end of the meeting, if the public has any comment on the beach management plan, if y'all hear any discussions, talking with any other property owners, any other locals, we'd love to hear them. So please send them our way.
How's the beach doing right now?
I think it's the same. We were talking with Brian and Josh following Cindy, and the east side is still getting beat up pretty bad.
It varies by the time of year. In the spring, early spring, late spring, east end of the beach tends to suffer from a southeast wind combined with higher tides. Cindy did come up to the dune, and most places on the east end of the beach, really all the way down, to into 38. Once you get past Topsail and onto Miramar, the beaches are much wider or deeper, from toe of dune out to the edge. So, and they're higher as well too. After the storm, things got back to semi-normal. We got a little bit different shelf pattern at the edge of the water, in most areas of the beach. It shifted the first sandbar in a little bit. One area noticeable is at Grayton. Charter boats have difficulty launching there now, using the alternate in the beach area temporarily. I think some of them are launching back at Grayton now as the sandbar starts to equalize, and then a gap forms where they can get out, from the first sandbar. So, but it's the beach is affected as it has been over the last decade. Critically eroded. Certain types of events cause the water to get up to the dune. So, is there any public comments on Matt's presentation?
Yeah, that was, and it's all information that you guys have seen before. The beaches are eroded. That's the problem is there's a loss of sand in the system, a loss of supply. So without that supply, artificially induced, we're going to continue to be in that eroded state. Whether that be through dune restoration or full-blown beach restoration, whatever it may be, the impacts of 2004, 2005 hurricane season shifted a lot of that sand offshore. What we've seen is that material has come back, but the material that was shifted so far east and west, the dune erosion that had in some areas overtopped and washed over into the dune lakes, in other areas just gone so far offshore, that material has not recovered, and we don't expect it to recover. So it's that dramatic change you see during a major storm event. The only way we're going to get a lot of that material back is to artificially replace it. So that's the situation we're in right now, and being prepared at this point in time with a post-storm response, I think that's our best effort, our best response. We do have, I say our survey quality data, meaning actually recorded by a professional surveyor with, highly accurate equipment, probably dates back to the early 70s. We do have a lot of historic maps that go back all the way to 1800s, but you got to kind of take those with a grain of salt. The biggest thing is erosion was never an issue at that point in time because you never built out on the beach unless you could afford to lose your home, and then those folks typically built well far inland of the dune. And there's a lot of houses, I think, over on the far east side of the county that, you look at those folks like, well, they built right on the edge of the dune. They actually didn't. They actually built 100 feet landward, and they've seen such erosion to where now they're at a critical point and they're forced to, face a situation of a seawall or dune enhancement or whatever the situation may be. So people really did, build well, I guess, or, plan well at that time. It's just we've seen, homes don't move, but the beach system does. What we've done is take a very dynamic system and turned it static. And that's the problem with dealing with Mother Nature, unfortunately.
Matt, when were the R monuments established?
Late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
And they're spaced every 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet?
Every 1,000 feet. So what Brian's referring to is these are concrete monuments, survey control every 1,000 feet along the beach, and they're typically just landward of the crest of the dune. And every 4 years or so, the state was going out and collecting beach profile data. So they'd survey the dune, the elevation of the dune and the beach, and then they'd go offshore, and we'd capture the whole sandbar and the offshore bar all the way out to about a 40-foot depth, about 3,000 feet offshore. So that's what we refer to as the beach system. So when we're looking at beach erosion, sometimes, you can have the dune gets wiped out. It's very clear and easy to see, but a lot of times that sand is just sitting directly offshore, and it will migrate back. Sometimes that's not the case. With a large enough storm event, it pushes that sand so far offshore or so far east and west, we can't account for that. So by doing a very simple volume calculation and volume balance, you can see where that sand has come and where it's gone. And that's the data we're using when we're making management decisions. And unfortunately, we haven't done those surveys in about 4 years. And that's one of our big recommendations to the TDC is let's get on a program. The state used to be great about collecting that data, but we all know the state budget situation. That was one of the first things to get cut, so the state hasn't gone out there, I think since 2007 or maybe 2010. It's been a while, so it's kind of fallen to the locals, the counties, to come in and collect that data themselves. And it's not a small expense, but data that's certainly worth having.
You say it's not a small expense? Can you ballpark it? Where we get on a program?
I think we're talking somewhere on the order of about $40,000, just to have the data and have it sitting there. Analysis, you can always throw on another $5,000, $10,000 on top of that. But $50,000 every 2 years, $25,000 a year, that's a pretty good investment. We'll have all those details in the report. Any other questions?
The borrow source, how much of that would you expect actually came from the beach?
It is all, there's a tremendous amount of studies that go into that. The borrow source for Walton County is a little bit further offshore. It's about in 60 to 70 feet of water, a couple miles offshore. It is from the same geologic formation as the beach sand that you see out there now. If you go and look at the dunes, especially after an erosion event, you can see there's that layering. There's some darker material in the dunes, and then the sand that's on the beach is nice and white. That's been weathered. It's been polished by wave action, by wind action, and it's the nice, pretty white crystals you see out there now. It's the same crystals that are out there in the borrow site. However, there are some organics, there are some silts, there are some staining of those particles, if you will. But through the dredging process, that gets abrased very heavily. It's a very violent process to dredge that material, liquefy it, pump it up, and place it on the beach. So it loses a lot of that. And what we've seen is within 30, 60, 90 days, you see a pretty tremendous lightening of that sand. But It is the same geologic character. We have a lot of independent studies that go to show that. However, it hasn't seen the light of day in a few centuries probably. So that's the main issue. Is there is going to be, we're not going to find sand as light as you see on the beach. And a lot of the sand mines that you have north end of the county, the quantity is finite and the quality is there, but they go through a tremendous washing, sifting, and sorting process. That's why it's so expensive. We're looking at paying about a third of what those upland mines are. And when you're talking about a beach project, even a dune restoration project could potentially be 500,000 to 1 million cubic yards. It adds up pretty quickly when you're looking at tripling that. So again, why we want to keep that source online should we need it. So.
Anybody have any questions? Any more comments? Okay, let's move on to code enforcement. Lisa,
Yes, I had asked Brian to, or Stacy, or whoever got to provide this, to just let us see what's happening so far with our additional code enforcement officers on the beach. And June is, we only have June so far, but,
Yes, ma'am.
it gives us some indication. It looks like dogs, tents, vendor contacts have gone way down. At least
If you'd
that's
like,
my
I can go through this
perception.
kind of quick if you'd like.
Pardon?
I can go through this pretty quick if you'd like.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah, okay. So the first page, the first pie chart and data is total contacts. As you can see, we have 1,362 total contacts. So a contact by code enforcement is where they stop and talk to a person to take some form of enforcement action. It also includes a few calls and meetings, but you'll see that on the second page. Very few, and there's 20 of those. So the majority, the bulk of this is where we have gotten out and worked with somebody that either had the possibility of being non-compliant or was non-compliant. When I say possibility, there's a few areas where we talk to people where we have to determine if they are compliant. Dogs is a big one. A dog on the beach does not automatically equal non-compliant behavior. They have permit requirements, hours of the day, being on a leash. And so when we stop and talk to a dog, for instance, we check all those. And so explaining what a contact is, moving through, we then separate it by what I call categories. And so the categories are Chapter 22 and Chapter 23. Chapter 23 is a very brief category. It's one category. It's customary use. Chapter 22, there are 18 to 20 items, and some of those items have sub-items that we are charged with enforcing. And so if you look at miscellaneous other contacts, those are items that we didn't categorize specifically, but they're generic in form. 396 of those. Next one would be glass, 73 contacts. All in all, glass, we do have some issues with it on the beach. If you think about the amount of people that use the beach, meaning locals and visitors to our beach, 73 contacts on glass. Now, I recognize that we do not talk to everybody that has glass on the beach, but we do, in our routine patrols, one of the items we're looking for, because it is a safety issue, is glass. And so, if we can catch people unaware, unfortunately, people do see us coming, and it's not hard to hide a glass bottle or a wine glass, but as you see, so that's our contacts in there. The pie chart's broken into color coordinated, and then there's a legend on the side that says what the colors mean. Next one is horses, dogs on the beach. Horses, of course, aren't allowed at any time, but that's the title of the section, so leave it in there. 140 contacts, approximately 40% of the time they were compliant. The rest of the time they received a verbal warning or a citation. Some cases, the gray where it says other is where there was another disposition. In other words, we encountered a dog that didn't have an owner with it. Leave no trace. public. Once again, that's where the general public is. We actually administrate a portion of this, really the majority of this, through our beach maintenance crews. We run a crew down the beach at night, and anything that is, left from the toe of doom or the most southern point of boardwalks down the water's edge, we consider it abandoned. Code identifies that, and we're able to dispose of it as we see fit. A lot of it gets recycled. Some of the stuff's not worth keeping and it goes in a dumpster, where there is some recycling effort at the landfill, but not much. Leave no trace vendor. Once again, this is handled by code enforcement. As you see, 31 contacts. The amount of, we have, I think we have a little over 100 vendor permits issued, and that's probably about 60 to 65 vendors. Some vendors have multiple permits. I don't know the exact number of chairs we have on the beach or chair sets, but 31 out of the month is actually pretty good. This data would reveal to me that vendors are actually doing a pretty good job of keeping their items off the beach at night. Typically, the infractions or non-compliant behavior we encounter with them is, is a new person they've hired, or a random set that was taken to a delivery type situation and simply forgot about. I wouldn't call it malicious by any means. Customary use, you see, is the next one. 214 contacts on customary use. We all knew that tents in Chapter 22 and tents primarily in Chapter 23 were going to be a hot topic, so we'd expect this item to be very large. 214 contacts is a lot. To be quite honest with you, we're having...
Brian, so what do you mean, what happens on typical contact?
Well, customary use, I said, customary use was adopted, and in its basic premise, it is uninvited guests allowed to use privately held beach area in a traditional or customary beach use type. And so that would be surfing, fishing, sunbathing. There are certain items that you're allowed to use and certain items that are strictly prohibited. And so items that are allowed are cooler, chair, umbrella of 7-foot diameter or less, a beach towel, picnic, supplies. Things that are not allowed are tents, umbrellas greater than 7 feet in diameter, animals, and then of course tobacco is one of them. There were a few other items that were recommended by the committee, but since the item was either already illegal by Florida statute or the item's behavior that was created by using that item, alcohol, the public drunkenness is also not allowed by Florida statute. So those weren't included in this customary use. So the main thing that we deal with in customary use right now is tents. And changing the code is easy. Changing a cultural behavior is very hard. People that come to our beaches, the pop-up tent is the choice of sunshade. And so we have experienced a really high volume of complaints against tents in the form of customary use, as well as in the accompanying Chapter 22 section of the code, 2254, I think it's Q, that says you can't have a larger than 6x6x6 tent, or a tent that would fit in a 6x6x6 cube. We consider that a cube container. And so once again, it's the first year we've enacted this. We enacted it in mid-April, and the effort to get the signage changed on our boardwalk kiosk signs. We have a lot of our regional beach accesses, we have a large kiosk sign at the top of the boardwalk and at the bottom of the boardwalk, and at every neighborhood beach access, we have one at the bottom, and we now are implementing one at the top that has the basic rules and regulations that were either revised and the existing ones. That signage actually started being installed yesterday. We started at Stallworth Reserve, and we're moving towards the east on 38, and we're moving towards the west on Scenic Gulf Drive. We probably could have done a better job in getting the signs revised, but there was this issue of Chapter 23 being challenged in court, and so we were lagging up to see if that was going to be an immediate injunction or if it was not. It appears that it's not right now, but that could change any day. But we decided we'd go ahead and make this change. It's a very significant effort to change the signage at all these beach accesses. We've also put all these new rules and regulations on the county website, our website. We established a quicker link on our front page to get to beach rules and regulations. It's on the beach safety page. Our beach ambassadors are doing what I call a run and gun effort in most areas of informing the people that are on the beach that are not compliant with the tent. They're also static at certain regional beach accesses and neighborhood beach accesses where we have what we call hotspots. There's a couple of areas on our beach, actually several areas, that they're just hotspots for tents. So I've put beach ambassadors in those positions, static at the boardwalk, and their intent is to intercept people before they get on the beach. It's much easier to stop a person before they've set a tent up. Moving on to talk about your original question, what is our typical contact interaction is code enforcement by Florida statute has to give what's called a notice to cure. All right, so when we encounter a person, we have to inform them of non-compliant behavior, and we have to give them opportunity to correct. There is no definition of that time, so we have to use our discretion. And depending on time of day, amount of people, age of people, and all that affects notice to cure. If we catch them early in the morning, we usually give them a 2-hour notice to cure. If it's midday, we ask them if they can remove it when they go home for lunch. And but typically it's a 2-hour deal. If it's later in the afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, we ask them not to bring it back the next day. Obviously, they have a bunch of elderly people or a bunch of very young people. We might give them, till if it's early in the morning, we'll give them to lunch. If it's at lunch, we give them till the next day. Once again, it's officer's discretion based on trying to balance the private property rights, the owner's property rights, and giving these people a opportunity to correct the behavior. So that's our chapter 23. Chapter 22, same deal. We have to give them notice to cure. We catch them the next time after notice to cure. We give them a ticket, and then that ticket escalates at $100 per incident, up to $500, and it tops out at $500. That was a long answer to your question, but I felt it was important to explain a lot.
Thanks, Brian.
It's only one warning, and then there is citation if
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
reoccurrence.
In the areas of customary use, we have adopted, it's a verbal warning and or written warning. Sorry, so what's the difference between a verbal warning and a written warning? Typically the person's attitude, okay? If we encounter a family down there that says, and they're genuine in their ignorance, it's a verbal warning. We do collect their information, basic information, the name, address, and that, so that we have it we've captured it in our database. If they are obstinate and obvious to us that, they may be challenging the code, it's a written warning. And the reason we do that is we feel like a written warning may carry a little more motivation to not do it the next time. But as you well know, we have some people that are just truly obstinate. And some people, unfortunately, in our community, when I say our community, people that come here to visit, they like to know how much, what does it cost to play? Really, is this ticket good for the day? Is it good for the week? $100? Sure, no problem. Does that mean I won't have interaction with you again today? And, once again, the code says that we have to give them a 24-hour period for the next interaction. And, we try to answer that question with, yeah, you got $100 ticket good for today. We tell them, no, we catch you again, it's just $200 ticket.
And just FYI, related to this, if a tent is reported, or a violation is reported, and the people are not present, which does happen, especially with tents and things like that, then the code enforcement officers are leaving a written notice on their tents, which I was glad to see, because, part of what I think created a lot of these problems was people setting up tents and then leaving for 2 hours and coming back for a while, and leaving for 2 or 3 hours and coming back for a while. So when the code enforcement officers get there, it's not unusual for there to be tents that have no one there to talk to.
Yeah, you're right. And like I said, we consider that notice, and we take pictures of all this, included in our database. As you know, we run a MS Access based data collection system, and it's very useful. It's on, live. Our guys enter it right there on the beach and computers. I can access it. Our secretaries and code enforcement admin can access it anytime, and it allows us to keep track of who we've encountered, where we've encountered them, and more importantly, allows us to report accurately our efforts so that all the affected people can understand what we're doing. One thing I try to convey to people is that with a code change like this, customary use, tent size, and a few of the other items that we did to Chapter 22, it takes a while to get the people educated, and so I ask for patience as much as can be. I know that it's very frustrating to private property owners, but if we can be afforded some time, our efforts are certainly there. BCC resourced us with half a dozen additional officers. It gets us 10 officers, 1 manager, 2 code enforcement admin people, and we're, like I say, 1,300 contacts a month. Last month was around 1,200. Month before that around 1,100. That's a lot of, you think about it, we're on the beach 7 days a week, and we generally have coverage from 5:30 to 12 midnight. And during the bulk of the day, that's usually 5 to 6 officers on the beach at any given time. Jeff, like I say, is a manager. He's out there a lot, but he's also in the office a lot, taking care of managerial duties. So as you can imagine, that coverage is a little less in the mornings and a little less in the evenings, but during the bulk of the day, we have, officers out there, and we have it sectioned into 4 zones, and we, our online complaint form goes into a GIS mapping, our GIS system, and we pick it up off there, enter in our database, the officers in those zones pick it up, and we prioritize it as we get them. And our response time right now can vary from 2 hours to 4 hours, sometimes on a heavy weekend like Memorial Day weekend. I think we've received somewhere in the neighborhood of 340 complaints over the 7-day period. And so you can imagine that's a lot of complaints to process and get to, and we're not dispatch oriented, we're complaint oriented, and we put them in queue and we go to them as best we can. So,
Do you want to cover all 10 questions now, or do you
Sure,
want to
yeah,
finish
yeah.
your presentation and then go for it?
let's go. The rest of the items in this, are fairly insignificant, driving on the beach and stuff like that. And it's all the same format. So you can look through it. If you have particular questions, email me, or call me, or whatever you want to do. And I'll be glad to answer them. Most of them are fairly easy to decipher, what happened. And if you got any particular questions about means or methods, I'm certainly glad to ask them. But yeah, if we've got more 10 questions, let's.
I have some.
Oh, I've got more, but please
Go
go.
ahead. No, you-
Oh, no,
okay.
I got a list of things to ask, so you go.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused. You're not allowed to have anything more than a 6x6 tent on public beach access.
Correct.
But you can have a larger one on private property.
That's correct.
Okay, so what's the percentage of Gulf front properties that are rented out? Do we have an idea of that? I mean, it's probably 75% of them, wouldn't you think?
Right.
And so these rentals, chances are they're not gonna say that you can't put a tent up because they want their customers to be able to put a tent up.
And they're allowed to do that.
So I'm sitting at Blue Mountain Beach and I'm just watching them just stream down one after another and they're just filing off, both sides and just setting their tents up all down the beach. Cause they're all rental properties and nobody's gonna say not to.
Right.
So to me, it's just ridiculous. You got what, a 66-foot easement right there at the Blue Mountain Beach access? And
Yes, sir.
of course, half of that's taken up with beach chairs and the rest is people. And so there's really no room for tents. So they're all going to the side anyway.
Right.
So, it's like, no, you can't do it here, but you can do it all down there.
Yeah.
To me, it's just totally ridiculous, just watching these people just file down with their tents and it's
Yeah.
perfectly okay, but it's not okay in this area, or in this area, or this one person that lives in their house like you do, but how many people next to you? Well, your neighborhood's pretty much a lot of residents.
My neighborhood,
Probably
my
mostly
neighborhood
all.
is not,
Yeah,
it's none of the.
No,
beach.
no,
But most of them, I mean, it's just, we just need some rules, some beach etiquette, not that you can do it here, you can't do it there. It's just so confusing, you go to somebody and tell them, no, you can't put your tent up. Well, the guy right next to him has his tent. What do you mean I can't put my tent up?
You're right, and you explained one of the bigger challenges to enforcing this code is that's what we get.
But you can't put lights up on the beach. I mean, because it's turtles. It's beach etiquette and stuff, I mean, so let's just outlaw tents. I mean, come on. It's just, some of these rules are just,
Yeah, and as you know, at the end of every year, we go over, what was good, what was bad, and what needs to be changed, and I'm thoroughly convinced that tents will be revisited in one form or fashion.
I think they should be allowed, because I think they need shade, but I think they need to be back. They need to be back, you can't be front row, gotta be the back row.
But where do you establish that line? See, that's one of the things that I have a challenge with when I'm trying to make recommendations for code revisions.
Well, you got your,
Is the enforcement.
well, you got your 15-foot
I agree.
aisle, so
Just
just north, or just south of that.
I'm of the same mindset you are, that we ought to do it do it uniformly.
It's like all or nothing,
Either ban them all or let it go free, however you want to say, but.
And of course, any private
But-
property owner has the
Yeah.
right to,
Well,
Yeah.
we gotta recognize that private property owners do have title to the
Yeah.
water line. And, while county code does affect private property, you have to be, cognizant of what you're trying to do in the public's interest, okay? So cars in the front yard, up on blocks and grass and all that, of course, are a nuisance, attract rats and vermin, but, tents on the beach aren't necessarily a public nuisance on private property. So anyway, but as you know, when we were going through last year, the initial recommendations got, diced, sliced, smothered and covered, and so that they weren't the original, recommendations that were made. Because like I say, as I'm trying to recommend revisions, I always think about our actual ability to enforce that particular code on the beach. And, there at the end, we realized that it was going to be an extreme challenge with the different beach situations and if you were compliant or non-compliant with tents. And we're experiencing exactly what you just said.
yeah, I think a lot of the rules that we made are just, we just can't enforce them.
I believe.
And to me, it's
Yeah.
kind of silly to make a bunch of rules that we just can't enforce. Why
Yeah.
put more rules on it?
Well, the other thing that I always advocate is self-regulation.
Yeah, and which the vendors have done
They've done
apparently a
job.
great job of.
Now, if we could get the general public, to self-regulate.
Well, there is one attitude that you brought up, that they're paying for it and they're gonna do what they wanna do. And I get a lot of that from
How do we
one
change that?
particular community that visits us a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so how do we change that? I mean, I'll be quite honest with you, what I'm seeing this year is even more of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's,
Are our numbers down this year? Do we have any idea? It seems like
our
traffic's
our
down.
rate of growth is down,
Yeah.
right, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think our numbers are probably a little flat. I mean, we're seeing an increase in TDT collections, but I think that's probably rate that's driving that increase. But
Yeah.
I think the numbers are, I wouldn't say we're down, but I'd say we're flat.
Yeah, I went into Walmart Friday before July 4th weekend and walked right in and walked right out. I couldn't believe it.
Well, how do you increase beyond 100% full anyway? I mean, you know, because we've been pretty much
Yeah.
hit that number a while back.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
are you done, John?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's just a few things I want to mention some things, I want to ask some questions. Early on, we had some problems with definitions of what exactly was a tent, not so much on the public beaches because that's 6 by 6 by 6, but we had, you know, concerns with what was a baby tent, where canopies really tents. There's this new thing, although I'm told it's not really new, but it was new to me, sport umbrellas that are 8 foot in diameter with tent flaps. Were they tents? And the answer to all of those things is yes, they're tents. So a lot of things got cleared up fairly quickly by working with the county attorney and Brian and Jeff and the code enforcement officers where, you know, they started knowing exactly what they were trying to enforce. So that was kind of a step one. And kudos to the guys because they adapted to that pretty quickly once they knew. I have an advantage of having been on the customer use committee, which means I know what intents were, not that we got everything we asked for because we certainly didn't, but I know what the discussions were and the intents. And some of you were there because I recognize several of you being there. The signage thing, Brian, I apologize, I have not seen the one at the Stalwart. What does it say exactly?
It has, if you're familiar with our basic kiosk signage, right below the, what we call the wave, underneath our logo, we have, let's see here. We have safety first, and that is the block of blue that has the flag system in it. And then right below that, we had a light blue swath that had basic rules. Okay, it says rules. So that block there has been revised with all the new rules and the existing rules. And then to the right of that was a square that had a turtle message in it. And it was a fairly brief message. We replaced that block, and it's approximately on the bigger signs, I think it's 10 by 12. Is that right, Josh? Oh, Josh, okay. On the bigger signs, it's 10 by 12. On the smaller signs, which is Neighborhood Beach Accesses, it is, I believe, 8 by 10. That has the customary use message in it. And what that says is, what is customary use? So it's a 2-paragraph statement, and it basically gives those primary tenets of customary use. And so it says customary use codes allows restricted use of all privately owned areas of the flat sandy beach fronting the Gulf of Mexico. Restricted use includes traditional beach activities such as sunbathing, swimming and fishing, and also allows for beach chairs, beach towels, and shade umbrellas under 7 feet in diameter. Customary use on privately owned beach areas does not capitalize, allow uninvited guests to bring any tents or pets or use tobacco products, and does require adherence to all applicable state laws. These restrictions do not apply to property owners or their invited guests. And so, like I said, that's in a block that's got a border, so it somewhat stands out. And then, like I said, the section next to it, which was our area that already had rules, has the new revised rules that says the size of tents and all that.
Okay, so on locations that are public, does it only have the one that has the 6 by 6? And on the ones that are not?
No, man, it has, we decided to do this at all beaches.
It has them on both. Okay, well, we'll see if that creates confusion or not. And I don't know. I mean, we find out as we go along, don't we?
Right.
A couple couple of, a few things that I'd like to, for us to address in the future, and, some of these are gonna have to be you mentioned the response time. I mean, there's a lot to cover, there's 11 guys to do it. Are you gonna do any kind of analysis of what times of day, and I know you've already recognized some hot spots, but for instance, what if you find out that the times of day that you get the most reports are from, let's say, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., I'm making this up, and again from 7 to 9 at night. Are you going to try to do a demand staffing structure and analyze that stuff and then do
Me and
demand
Jeff
staffing?
analyze what our complaint, of course, our online complaint form is fairly new.
Mhm.
So we collect all that data and it gets time stamped and all that. And so we'll review it and find out. Like I said, the tents are a hot item and there are hot spots. But there's also all the rest of chapter 22 that is up and down the, really 18 miles of beach. Since we do patrol some portions of the state parks. To the state parks, people would like for us to control the tents on their property as well, even though they want us to do some things but not other things.
The state parks?
They do. There's some area like Deer Lake, and since the manager's not there physically. They've asked us to control vendors and stuff on Deer Lake State Park.
That's
So,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a working relationship we have with the state park systems. Some things we agree on, some things we don't agree on how the beach area needs to be managed there. But
Well, and I know, for instance, you have, at least the code enforcement officers have told me there've been considerable bonfire patrol issues they've had to handle. So that's not gonna occur at the same hours that the tents are, for example. So, that's one thing that I was hoping you'd be able to do as a result of your
Right,
complaint
but you also,
forms.
like I say, once again, even though we have been resourced greatly, it's still a limited resource. I mean, you guys can only work 40 hours a week. We don't have budgeted funds for overtime, even though I do on the holiday weekends, I just go against our county policy of overtime, and I just have guys work, and we pay them comp time. If they want overtime, we pay them time and a half, but if they'll take comp time at time and a half, we do that. But comp time just takes away from a later period, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so there's that massaging of all that together in order to make sure, because if I just focused on tents and customary use at particular hotspots, other areas of the beach are gonna pop up
Oh, sure.
and be their own hotspots on something else.
You've got a lot of area to patrol, and I know some places have a lot more dogs off leashes. Up here at the Eastern Lake area must have a lot of that, because I consistently read about it on social media. But, those are the main things that I've noticed is that, the officers do a good job. They just have a very big territory to cover. And because of that, the response time, may be fairly quick if they happen to be close by. But if you've got one or two guys on the beach and one of them's in Miramar and they need to be at Eastern Lake or maybe both of them are somewhere on the west end and they need to be at Eastern Lake, then it takes a while to get there, especially if they try to cover calls all along the way.
Well, like I say, we have it zoned, so we have officers in zones.
Oh, so each zone's what, 4 or 5 miles?
Yeah, we have 4 zones, and, I don't know the exact mileage of them, because some of them are a little bit bigger because of the state parks.
Okay, depending on, what's going on there. Okay, I think this is there's 2 things. I've heard a number of people concerned, because our system right now at least is complaint driven. There are a lot of people that are uncomfortable about that, about having to give their names, and they're concerned about retribution, frankly, because of reporting things. So on the public beaches,
Yes, ma'am.
particularly, if the officers see anything bigger than a 6x6 tent I mean, obviously, if they see glass, if they see, you know, certain kinds of behaviors,
Right.
I know they're handling, but with tents, are they literally trying to address every over 6 by 6 foot tent that they see on a public beach?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Because there's a bunch of them. Those are probably the ones that make the news reports,
Well, you know,
because the people complain now.
I go out every day,
Mhm.
usually on my lunch hour, in and around my lunch hour, to observe regional beach accesses where we have our public beaches. And because I was, you know, getting, you know, right, these tents are everywhere. But when I go down to these regional beach accesses, I'll use the Edward Lane, for instance, okay? One of our bigger ones, well, not biggest, but very popular. And if you think about the confines of Edward Lane, there wasn't, like yesterday, I counted 2 tents on Edward Lane that were non-compliant. Now, on each side of Edward Lane, there's private property. And the other thing is you gotta remember is the private property lines are actually at about a 15-degree slant to the water's edge. And it's really they're north and south. Our beach just crests down towards southeast at that particular angle. And so, while if you're standing there at the top of the boardwalk, you say, oh my gosh, look at all these tents on public beach. But if you, in your mind, can delineate where the actual boundary lines are, you would see that, no, there's not. There's a couple, okay? And I would have expected that our code enforcement guys and our beach ambassadors in their patrols on that section of beach had stopped and talked to those, or would have stopped and talked to them sometime during the day. But that, and like Gulfview Heights, 100-foot right of way down there. And so, you know, once again, I was getting complaints down there of us selectively enforcing that, you know, you only talk to us, you didn't talk to the people next to us. Well, the people next to you were on private property. Now, were they guests of that person? We don't know. But, so we have to be complaint driven on private property, because we can't stop on the, you know, 75% of our beach, 65% maybe of our beach is private property, and ask each person, much less be able to verify if that person is a invited guest or an uninvited guest. And that's why we are complaint driven, truly on the aspect of customary use, and or tent size on what is private beach. You know, we can distinguish fairly accurately by the Private Predators website, which we have as an overlay on our GIS system. Our guys have their computers in their trucks as they're rolling down the beach. And, you know, our guys now, or even the newer hires, have become very familiar with what's public and what's private. And so it's you know, they don't have to reference each, you know, time they stop. They do, because it's quick and they have it up on their screens. But if you think about it, you know, if we stop and talk to everybody, first question you have to ask, are you invited guest or uninvited guest? The probability of getting an accurate answer on that is probably pretty slim, especially once people figure it out. All I gotta do is say, oh yeah, I'm staying in unit 20, you know? Just like going to a swimming pool at a condo, you know?
Sure. My privilege here. Well, would you consider, Brian, the same system that was done with the vendors a few years back, where basically the private property owners that did not want to have tents on their property, you did a map. You did it with vendors, you know, where you had a map that said, okay, this group of people, because to your point, a lot of the people that are private property owners are absentee owners. They rent, or they maybe are here, you know, a month or whatever a year, and perhaps they really don't care to get into the enforcement issue. And that's fine, that's their prerogative, but on people who are full-time residents or want to make sure, they at least do not rent, so therefore they want the consistency so that it doesn't further confuse the issue. Because, you know, let's say somebody is a part-time resident, but they don't do rentals.
Yeah.
And so they're here in town, and they want to be able to use the beach themselves too, and then they're out of town, and, you know, anything goes because they're out of town and unable to enforce. And they don't want that, they don't wanna do it that way because it gives people the impression,
Yeah. I
you know,
imagine we
that they
could look at
can
that on
do
a,
things on their
like
property.
a subdivision type basis.
Yeah,
The problem we found when we did that, with the I don't want it works fairly good, but we would encounter on a fairly regular basis, a setup there. And when we talked to that vendor or the people in the chairs, oh no, I'm staying at this house. And so what happened is even though the people said they didn't want vendors there, and there was not a vendor zone there, the people that they rented to didn't know that rule. It wasn't conveyed to them, or they simply chose to ignore it. And they would call up, XYZ Beach Service and say, I need some chairs down here. And XY Beach Service, most of them were pretty good. They'd say, oh, there's not a vendor zone. Some of them, they're really not trying to be compliant or don't want to be compliant. They'll just bring them chairs. Or they would bring them chairs to the back door and say, hey, there's not a vendor zone. I can't set them up there. And then those people would go set them up there and all that. So that system worked fairly good, but it still created some issues. But,
yeah.
in a case like where, obviously all the people in Stallworth, we think at this point, and all the people in Beach Highlands, we think at this point, do not want tents and will not be using tents.
Well,
on
I
the
can't
beach.
promise you that everybody, but I will tell you, and this is just my personal belief. I feel like if I don't want tents on my property, number one, I don't use them, I haven't used them, I never have used them, except when I camped in the woods. And so I call it what you will, leading by example or whatever. I just think it's less confusing. If I don't want somebody to do something on my property, particularly when we're dealing with these kind of issues, it's early on, we're trying to resolve things as we go, then I just think we try real hard not to use tents at all. And, because we have a little HOA, I basically suggested our people that if you want to avoid confusion, that's a good way to help by not using vendors, not using tents. We all realize that you've got the occasional special occasion, maybe that would be an exception, but it's a tough, it's a very difficult
That's the problem is, it's like,
situation.
so you give us a blanket statement, Brian, we don't want any tents on the 13 lots in Beach Highlands.
Yeah.
All right, so we're down there and we see a tent.
Yeah.
And we roll up on it, hey, I'm sorry, Nintendo tents are out. Well, I'm staying at this house and what do you mean? And so we don't have any way to say, well, okay, can you give me proof of identification?
See, I think we ought to do that. If we want to enforce it on private property, I think private property owners ought to be willing to do that. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, I know, but with the complaint, then we have a definitive statement by a person that owns that property that they don't want any tents on that property.
They just have to be there to see it is the problem. And that's where that inconsistency comes in. So it's not an easy thing. I mean, none of this is easy.
I know, and I'm thinking once again that as, the enforcement action down at Stallworth goes through this year, and people will begin to learn, hey, you can't take a tent down in Stallworth, you're gonna get a ticket. Nobody wants tents down there. And, through our educational efforts at the top of the boardwalk with our beach ambassador, I think that will slowly wane. I'm not saying it's ever gonna go away completely because we have a 7-day visitor that gets exchanged every week. Now, a lot of people that come to your area, come to the Stallworth area, come from the west. There's neighborhoods there just maybe to your west. And so those people, slowly the word will get out. The managers there will get complaints by the people they send down there that got, enforcement action against them. And they'll have to say, hey, guests, we direct you to a neighborhood public beach access at Stallworth. You got to be aware that it's actually access that is onto privately held beach area, and it can be used in a customary use fashion.
Well, and just for the record, we use the area I live in a lot because that way we're not using somebody else's. But there are other neighborhoods, and I'll just leave their names out of them, but they're very leery of using the reporting system. They've had problems before where, one owner's reported a problem, and then the next thing, you know, there's glass in their swimming pools, or
Yes, ma'am.
unmentionable things on their walkovers and stuff like that. And so it makes people very leery of, you know, of really even using the system
Yes, ma'am,
that,
I understand.
that's here, you know, to help them. So, I mean, you know, our area, because we are not a weekly rental, you know, we have enough people that are there to notice things, see
Mhm.
things, report them. And other areas do, but they're just reluctant to do it. And then, of course, like we have a beachfront rental, as you know, and I don't, you know, I don't try to do anything with that one as long as my renters aren't overwhelmed. Because my take on it is, if my renters complain to me that they're overwhelmed with other people, then I would report it.
Right.
But if they don't, then I'm not gonna report it, because people can't tell. And if my renters use a tent, and I'm not gonna tell them they can't, then I'm not gonna tell other people that, well, only my renters can use a tent here, sorry folks.
Yeah.
But that's just me, I'm not saying that my opinion should apply to the whole world or anything, that's just how I choose to handle it.
I was just wondering if next year, these people, when they book their unit, are they gonna ask, well, can I put a tent up? And then they're not gonna go to certain areas of the beach and,
Well, like I say,
you know, so, you know.
we encourage the bed tax collectors to put all the rules and regulations either in their contract.
That's fine, and
Post to
so they
speaker
call
city.
up and say, you know, they hear, no, you can't put a tent up, so they hang up and they call somebody else, can I put a tent up there? You know, and they keep finding, you know, call until they find where they can put a tent up, so some areas are gonna suffer while some areas are overwhelmed.
Well,
I mean, that's just business.
it is, and I think that, you know, eventually, people will understand that, you know, umbrellas, you know, really do keep the shade, you know, on you sufficiently. And to be quite honest with you, they're much easier to handle. I mean, you know, I wish I had all the answers to the tents. I wish I could make
It's just,
people-
you know, allowed partly, not allowed someplace, it's just, it's
It is.
confusing, it's not.
It's very challenging.
It's not enforceable.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a dilemma, for sure.
I got a couple questions. One, I was looking at these code enforcement officers. Are you finished with that?
I am, thank
Okay.
you, sorry about that.
I'm looking at the first page here, and I see like a couple of them, we got 13 contacts, 41 contacts. And then a couple of them, we got like 222, 227. Why the extreme discrepancies there? Is the time of day that they work, or?
Could be, and we have, you know, Jeff McVeigh is Beach Code Enforcement
Yeah.
Manager.
Which one? Okay, so he's 41.
Yeah, Harold Taunton and David Goodman are what we call crew leaders.
Uh-huh.
And so they are a, you know, mid-level management firm. And the rest of them, you know, have a fairly equal distribution.
Well, you got half, you know, some,
Yeah.
there's like three that are half the other three. But I just wonder if, you know, if it's just contact or time of day or overzealous
Some of it is, you know, we
code
have guys.
enforcement officers.
Yeah, you know, our shifts, we do what we call a shift bid system, and so the senior officers get the opportunity to pick, you know, schedules that are, I guess, more favorable to a person. So we have some people that work, you know, primarily in the 3:30 to 12:30 slot, and they, you know, depending, you know, our beaches are very alive at night. Last year, there was 3,600 bonfire permits issued, and we, you know, check about probably 75 to 80% of those. We check all of them, but we simply can't get to all of them. So those guys, you know, could be having a lot of contacts in one night, or they may be held up at one particular bonfire for an hour. We had some instances here earlier this year where, you know, there was a lot of grief and frustration with a resort community that was having a non-compliant event, and our guy was held up there for 2 hours. So it's hard to say, you know, what exactly causes the difference in distribution of contacts.
They're just pretty extreme, that's just why.
It is,
you know.
to a certain extent. I mean, you know, you have 15, 16, 17, and then 10, 8, 10, and 7, all right? And then the other, you know, guys are, you know, low because say, we would expect Jeff to not have a whole lot.
Yeah.
Some of it, is subject to people being out. Harold is actually out some of this month with back surgery. So he had a minor procedure, it wasn't huge back surgery. Yeah, and also, some of our guys went to code enforcement class, which was a week. Really Sunday to.
Are bonfires complaint driven also? Or are they just
They're
whenever
both.
they trip
They're
over?
both. We take a proactive stance to it because we're riding down the beach. At night, we're looking primarily for two things: wildlife lighting, compliance, and bonfires. Then we also encounter a lot of glass at night, and then just.
Well, and it helps because you have locations where all the bonfires are anyway, right?
We
So
know, yeah, we do.
if you know there's a concentration of them in Miramar Beach, for instance, then
right.
you,
We also, checking special events. Special events typically happen
sure.
in the late afternoon or late evening. And then, to be honest with you, a special event now, typically lasts till 10 p.m. when they have to be off the beach.
And the reason there's so many contacts on a bonfire as opposed to a beach chair or 10 or something like that is because they gotta check the permit every single time. So it's a contact, but you look, it said like 87% is in compliance. And then I wanted to make one note, full circle about code enforcement. I know that we have a few issues that we're always gonna work through, but in my personal opinion, just from the last 2 years to this year, I think it's been a tremendous improvement. I think harmony on the beach has increased. As everybody was stating this early winter, I think increased code enforcement has been a really good success. Every single person we deal with on code enforcement is extremely professional, very courteous. I just think it's been a win for everybody. So I know we're still gonna have issues that we're all gonna work
I've had
through.
some different experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might expect, I'm sure you got the calls and stuff.
In reference to,
Dogs.
Oh, dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, I, like to pompano fish for a couple months, March, April, or May. And, there was just a definite time, I guess that's when, sometime in there is when all the new code enforcement people got hired, because like sometime in the middle of pompano season, I just got bombarded by code enforcement.
Did you have a dog on the beach without a leash?
No, got a leash, got a permit, clean up after my dog, everything's fine.
Oh, okay.
Dog's usually, she's 14, yeah, so I don't walk her anymore, but she's usually laying at my feet. They gotta come right up to me, ask for the leash. Well, I point to the leash, it's tied around my sand flea ray, sitting right there at my feet. And then they wanna know the permit number. Could I get the permit number? Well, I say, yeah, go ahead while I continue fishing. And, so this happens to me 4 times in 1 week. This was the week after our last meeting. And, that's pretty excessive. I don't know how many dog owners, how many counterfeit permits we're finding on the beach now. I know that there's a few of them, but, to me, that was just ridiculous. One guy checked me twice in consecutive weeks.
Well,
I'm sitting in the same spot at the Fort Panic Beach Access pompano fishing every morning between 5:30 and 7:30, every day for 2.5 months. And I'm getting harassed. Well, a couple of them are nice. Can I check it? Go right ahead, check it. Does your dog bite? No, my dog's friendly. Go ahead. Well, the last one, he comes up, pulls up, all smug. Where's the leash? I point to the leash. Can I get the permit number? Sure, you can get the permit number. He sits there for a minute. He says, well, are you going to give me the number, or are you going to make me get out of my truck? Oh, well, excuse me. I came unglued. And no, a code enforcement officer, if he's got something to say, he pulls up in his truck, he gets out of his truck and he says, good morning, sir or ma'am. How are you today? This attitude, man, I've been telling all my friends about it and stuff, and I'm getting the same feedback from a lot of people.
Huh. Now,
And a lot of the dog owners I know, they carry 2 bags, one to clean up after their pet, and one to pick up all the trash down the beach that they encounter on their walk. They're mostly good people, and you're running them off the beach. I don't go to the beach anymore to walk my dog, I go there to fish.
John, I apologize for the interaction you had with one of our code enforcement officers. Every week, I instill in them three things: polite, professional, and courteous behavior, regardless of how we're being treated. Okay? Now, you and your friends are good dog responsible people. There's also 50% of the dog encounters that we encounter are not good responsible people. And one of the major complaints we get are about dogs on the beach. Because while you like dogs, other people don't like dogs. They don't want dogs on the beach at all. And so,
I understand, you know, but they're allowed on the beach. They're allowed certain
They are.
times. If they're not there, if they're there
They are.
outside the time. I've had two of them, one of my mornings, two of them sitting there in their trucks right there at the beach access, waiting for me to leave. It's like 7:30, 7:45. Okay, I'm leaving now. Gotta go to work.
yeah.
You know.
It's probably because you were in an area, where you go, Blue Mountain Beach?
Do now, Fort Fannin.
Okay.
It's a catch
Coastal
22.
Dune Lake Outfalls are a popular space for people to let their dogs run off the leash. Unfortunately, it's also the worst place to let their dogs run off the leash, because that's where you have concentration of shorebirds. And one of the primary reasons for restrictions on dogs is because of the interference with marine animals and shorebirds. Okay, it's not just because some people don't like dogs. There's actually an environmental reason.
Look how they've replaced all the foxes and coyotes that used to run on the beach.
Do what?
And so now the domestic dogs have replaced all the foxes and coyotes that used to run on
I
the
get
beach
it, Chris.
before it was populated.
Anyway,
Code enforcement tends to
I'll,
swoop down and
I'll make
Get
sure that I
green out.
emphasize that,
Yeah, because it's an access
Access,
point,
yeah.
yeah.
any, my polite, professional, courteous message tomorrow at our meeting. One thing, and that we could do, and I'm not putting this on you at all, but if you have the permit number in your head, just rattle off the permit number.
Oh, I don't know it. And I can't see without my reading glasses, so I'm not gonna bend down to try to read it off the tag. And I can see some mom with her couple kids down there trying to look at the tag number, read the tag number, while little Billy runs out in the water.
The
Okay.
good news is.
We get you.
I mean, it's just ridiculous to me. And what's the code enforcement budget, and how much, I mean, it used to be 75% was all dog related. So what's our budget, like $600,000-700,000 for code enforcement now, for trucks and salaries?
It's carried across a couple, or.
I'd ask for that information right after my encounter,
Did you?
yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is. I'd have to go.
So, I mean, I'm thinking we're probably paying $500,000, at least $400,000 a year just to chase dogs around the beach. And I have a dog and I love dogs,
It's
but,
not-
you know,
it's
going
not-
back to that, just
it's
the
not just-
nonsense.
It's
And
not just to chase dogs around the beach. There's 18 different categories in chapter 22 and then chapter 23.
Well, yeah, but 75%, in previous years, 75% of the time was spent with dogs.
Don't forget the horses.
You know, and so if we're spending 75% of our time on dogs, we need to think about not allowing dogs on the beach. Keep in mind, our neighboring counties are starting to think about allowing dogs on the beach because it's good for tourism. So, I don't know, there's catch-22 there, but I think spending $500,000 a year chasing dogs on the beach, grown-ups, I mean, it's senseless to me.
I would respectfully disagree with
Yeah.
you that there's gonna be 75% of the budget
Okay.
on chasing dogs.
We did-
Well, the
we
last
did-
year, the last code enforcement
Well,
report
it
we
was
had
the-
from last year, it was 75%
It was
of the time.
it was the thing that showed up the most,
Okay.
is contacts.
Yeah, it was
But it's because we have a lot of
290
dogs
something,
off leash.
3,600 contacts. It wasn't quite 75%.
Yeah, but I mean, it's unfortunate that you did have that experience, and I do agree that that the code enforcement officers should, get out and greet people and that sort of thing, but I would have to tell you that, I mean, I think I've talked to every one of them at this point, and mind you, unfortunately, when they talk to me, they're having to handle a complaint, so that doesn't always bring out the best in people, and the guys have been very respectful and all, and I bet they've learned to know you, because we've got some dogs down on our end that it's the same dogs over and over that are licensed, permitted, and, the owners they get very well known, the dogs get known, and after a while, the officers know that, okay, this dog and this owner have a permit, so they don't go through it every single time anymore. But when you've got 11 different officers, you're most likely gonna get approached at least 11 times in total, and maybe some people have to approach you 2 or 3 times before it sticks.
There was a dog problem in Blue Mountain for a little while. It was, George Rouse's widow. She'd get up in the morning and let their dog out, and he'd just run out free and go down to the beach and hang out with me and my dog for a while. But it wasn't a beach goer. It was just a person that lived in a house near the beach.
Just letting the dog loose.
Let the dog out in the morning to go to the bathroom and
Okay.
down to the beach you went.
Duly noted on your attitude towards dogs.
Bonfires
Yes, sir.
was another thing. I know that Sammy, says that a grill is a bonfire, but, I mean, I understand the bonfires, you can't have more than one bonfire at Blue Mountain Beach, maybe 2 at Drayton, whatever. But you get a little Coleman grill that sits on your tailgate,
I can
a little
see that.
screw in a little gas.
He's giving me the pass along, something like that, like a.
Yeah, yeah,
And that does invite slippery slope arguments. You bring down your char grill.
yeah.
you know, So it's the bigger than a bread
Yeah,
box.
can we have
kind of
like a
analysis.
size or something, maybe gas versus charcoal, or I don't know how we
If you have a
quantify
small,
it.
if you have a small gas grill contained in the back of your pickup truck,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get any grief from us.
Right.
You might get, hey, how you doing? Quick safety, announcement, but it's not gonna be any interaction for a bonfire permit. If you have your 22-inch Weber down there in the sand, slam full of charcoal, and then after you get through eating, pile it up with firewood, it's a bonfire.
Mm-hmm,
And you
no,
don't-
I agree.
And if you get cute with, okay, well, if it's malicious compliance and got one,
Yeah,
on
you
this
got
page,
little
you
one
need
just-
6 of them, yeah, then you
Yeah.
got a problem. So.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people like to go down there and roast a dog
Yeah.
or something, and, that's,
Yeah, do it one time and you eat a sand dog and you say, man, that wasn't that great.
yeah, that's so fun. It makes memories for good.
Okay.
That's all I have for.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Follow up, Mr. Chairman, so, and I'm sure this is redundant, Brian, but if you don't mind indulging me. As far as code enforcement is concerned, so proactive enforcement on public beaches, clearly get that.
Yep.
Is it fair to say it's reactive enforcement on private beaches, or they patrol all the beaches?
Reactive for certain categories. Chapter 23 definitely. And the reason is because we simply can't stop at every larger than 6x6x6 tent down the beaches to first ascertain if the person is a invited guest or the owner. And since we do have a lot of rental properties where the rental person may not know what the owner's desires are and or what the rules are, we simply can't make a definitive decision on if that person's invited or not invited. That's why we're only reactive, complaint driven on that particular item.
And
However,
how does that relate to state park beaches, like Great Beach State Park? Is it reactive, is it proactive?
Matt Allen has asked us to deal with vendors on Grayton Beach and on Deer Lake, mainly Deer Lake, because they don't have a active manager or a ranger down there. They do have a person that goes down there periodically during the day to check on things, but he's not stationed there. And so what their policy is that a delivery vendor can deliver the goods to Deer Lake State Park, and I believe to Grayton Beach State Park. Is that right, Philip? Or do they have a?
For Deer Lake State Park, we have to abide by a pretty significant more amount of rules of what the state park wishes. Then Brayton,
Grayton Beach State Park proper?
I don't think anybody does anything there.
Not-
I never
yeah.
did that.
They did have a meeting back in February to consider a concession agreement for certain state parks. That would include a vendor doing the chairs and umbrellas. All right, so glass on the beach, they've asked us to take care of that, even though they do a very good job of that themselves at Grayton Beach State Park, because they have rangers that patrol the beach periodically. Deer Lake State Park, once again, topsail, we don't do hardly anything in topsail. They take care of everything they want to take care of themselves. And in fact, we typically bypass it by getting on Highway 98 and going around here.
And just for the record, I take my dog out there, I haven't been stopped yet, so I'm feeling
No.
kind of locked out, man.
What beach do you go
What's
to?
wrong with me?
What time do you go?
Well, no,
They just drive right on by.
the
They
Fort,
check my
the
tag.
Fort Panic is an access point. They're just all there all the time.
Okay,
It's just you, John.
all right.
You look suspicious, no?
Dog not running around, just laying on the beach.
I got a couple questions. Matt, you said that the recommendation would be 30 to 60 days, so by the time we meet next quarterly, that'll be out with the recommendations.
Yes.
Okay. And went to that workshop. It was actually really informative.
Thank you.
If I recall correctly, can you just confirm for me, and I know this will all be in the report, but for those who weren't there, it seemed to me that at the end of that, it's a partial dune restoration for private property owners and some of the public areas that might actually, there might be the political will or appetite to do some of the dune restoration, if not the sandy flat beach restoration.
There was some folks in the audience that did have those sentiments, but I don't know if I'd go as far as saying we could extrapolate that county-wide. But yeah, typically that's been a pretty attractive option for upland property owners. Is smaller dune enhancements is something they can pretty easily do, especially following the storm events of 2004, 2005. There was trucks out there nonstop bringing sand, and I think the county only had maybe one or two small sponsored projects on the far east side. But a lot of that was done by the property owners themselves. But the beautiful thing about getting that county-wide permit is we could very easily, if that permit was in place, we could very easily have it modified and just do only the upland dune portion. And I think what's so attractive about that is there's no ECL issue, there's no major permitting hurdles. It's really just as simple as replacing that dune, and it does provide a good amount of storm protection. So the problem is, in my mind, if we were to do something large scale, where would we find enough sand? And when you do a truck haul project such as that, you can really do some damage to the beaches, to the access points, the roadways. 30A and each one of those accesses out there would really take a beating. And that's happened on some of the larger dune restoration projects. So being able to utilize the borrow site sand and pumping it up, and then doing a full vegetation project afterwards, that's starting to look like a pretty attractive option. So either pre or post storm, but again, something we'll hash out a little further as time progresses. But I think that is pretty palatable to most folks.
Look forward to seeing more on that. Brian, quick question for you on.
Can you turn your mic on?
Hello? Hello? All right then. Sorry about that. Let's see. I was just curious if you had any off the top of your head stat comparisons on the code enforcement. Now that you guys have got more guys out there, I can speak from my perspective with beach safety that they've been very instrumental at critical times, and I'd like to thank.
So the question is, how is our actions on safety out there?
No. First, I want to thank you guys. When we had Cindy come through and we had to run a string of double red days,
Yeah.
the coordination between and having more of your guys out there was very instrumental to keeping people safe.
Yeah.
None of my guys had to get wet. None of your guys had to get wet. 0 fatalities, 0 rescues. It was great.
Awesome.
So I can already see the tangible benefit right there.
Yeah.
That 1 week's worth was worth your budgetary inflation.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that. Also, prohibitions of obstructions on the beach numbers. I'm interested to know that, I know that was kind of a hot button issue, people with the private property signs as the customary use ordinances and the challenges have gone. And it looks like we've had 40. Do you remember what the year-over-year number comparison was from this time last year?
So we're talking about is 2255, the sign post on the beach?
Yeah, is that, I guess, short answer, are we up or are we down? Has that kind of died off, or is it still as hot as it was?
Well, there's a lot of dynamics that affect that. Okay, the first one is that when the ordinance changed, we actually, prior to that, a lot of people, what I call voluntary comply with removing their post ropes and chains. one thing that's hard to do on the year over year now is, since we have, you know, twice as many officers, that also skews our number. And so, no, to be honest with you, I can't answer the question definitively as, is 40 a up or down number? I think 40 is very low for the month, and if I went back and looked at this actual, you know, interactions, I would probably find that a lot of these are vendors that have placed a sign too far on the beach, because, you know, signs are allowed to toe the dune.
Mhm.
And it's not that they're, you know, they're figuring what the limits are, you know.
I was just curious on your general impression, if that was.
Like I say, you know, I knew this year was gonna be hard to do year over year, so I don't attempt to do it, simply by having that much more people on the beach. You know, one thing I've struggled with since I've started here is trying to get accurate data, and accuracy is year over year is one of the components. And, you know, we've changed the code every year. We've added categories, we've, you know, changed certain policies on how we enforce, and then we've added new officers. And so if I attempted to do it year over year, it would create more questions that I simply couldn't answer as to why.
Right.
And so I've somewhat learned to produce data that I can answer questions to. that means something. I mean, I don't want to just say, oh yeah, we've increased our year over year, you know, by
6,000%. Yeah.
Well, why is that? Well, we got 6 new code enforcement. Yeah, that's not accurate data. I mean, it doesn't represent an accurate effort. You know, so. But all in all, you know, the post roads change signs and all that on the beach have diminished, you know, greatly. Once again, as any new codes enacted, people will slowly figure out what the limits are and what the loopholes are, and some will say, not going to abide by it at all, and we'll discuss this in court of law. So, and then those, you know, the legal department asks us to stand down on. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Does our audience have any things?
And, okay, do we need to ask the public if there's any comments they have on this?
Should we wait for public comments or
We're
do it
done
right
with
now?
figure item,
Anybody have any comments? Okay, let's move on to old business. You had discussed the differences between customary use and the beach ordinances and stuff last time, and we kind of discussed it a little bit and brushed by it. Did we need to take any action on that or anything?
No, I just hope that, as Brian pointed out, you know, we don't want to wait till the last. We end up behind the eight ball every year, and there were reasons that happened this past year. But I think we're more aware and can start addressing things. That's why I like when we talk about these things now. We're already seeing issues with confusion, or, you know, issues with response times or things, so we can address them much earlier. Like this year, had we been able to determine the things we determined, and the BCC addressed them and all, we might have already had signs. We would have had better education already in place to get out to the various ed tax collectors and public at large. And so that's all. I just want us to try to see if we can start addressing things early and not get in that situation again, especially since it sounds like there's a good likelihood we're going to review things again.
Yeah, the BCC has indicated that they want to be able to, at the end of the season, you know, quickly understand the code enforcement actions, you know, the activity, and then, you know, once again, you know, to be quite honest with you, over the last 3 years, we've touched on near about every aspect of this code and revised it, you know, in some form or fashion to either remove conflict or remove ambiguity. and in some cases add to it to change the behavior on the beach. And so each year, it reasonably ought to be easier. I mean, pretty, you can only massage something so much before you get it into the form you want it, where it's effective, and you're not gonna get it any more effective. So we'll be ready at any point. You know, our fiscal year is through the end of September, and so that's typically, you know, I'm usually ready with our TDC presentation at that October meeting, the 1st of October, and first week of October, and then it goes directly to the BCC at their very next meeting. So, but if we want to review it prior to the end of September, we can certainly do that because we have all the data compiled. It just won't be a full year of it, but we'll have a good idea of what complaints we received, what enforcement action we took, and of course, we'll have these meetings, historical data or information, and there'll be, I'm sure, members of the general public that will be ready to express their desires. So, I think once again, the attitude this year is let's get started as quickly as we can, and so that we have it hashed out before the end of the year, as opposed to hashing it out during January, February, March, and enacting in April, or in this case, customary use, waiting until May.
Like 2
Yeah,
weeks
May.
before,
Yeah.
before April 1st or something, when I was close.
That also give people time to challenge if they decide to challenge, you know, and all that.
I've asked for some budget numbers. I think it'd be nice if we could quantify some of these code enforcement items with the dollars that we're spending to, because, you know, like, you know, saving people, you know, that's money well spent, obviously, but, you know, chasing dogs to, you know, see if they've got counterfeit tags on them, I don't think that's well spent.
I
So.
can't break it down into what money we spend on dogs, but.
Well, I mean, you've got percentages of each of these contacts, you know, so, I mean, what's our overall budget and what's the percentage of it that we're?
But the different categories don't have the same weight. I mean, even though we have a number of, we can quantify the percentage of contacts.
Well, but you know the contact time, the amount they're spending over there, and, I mean, you're writing it all down as it's going on in the computers.
It goes back to get me to.
Well, I think we could have more information to look at some of these laws. I mean, if we're spending a lot of time chasing dogs, maybe we shouldn't allow dogs. If it's bonfires or tents, maybe we shouldn't allow them, but it'd give us a better idea of where to focus our enforcement.
Into a certain form that may be somewhat accurate, but by all means, it's not going to be, you know, we're not going to be able to say, well, we spent, you know, $250,000 chasing dogs, and that money's not well spent. It's just not going to come down to that, because your idea of money being well spent is.
Well, I think everybody else could make up their own mind whether it's well spent as long as it's categorized.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is, I mean,
You know.
different people, I mean, like I say, there's some people that simply don't want dogs at all, and they would consider.
Well, I mean, that's my whole point. You know, I think dogs should be allowed, but I think us chasing them around is ridiculous. So, I mean, we need to either change the rules or the enforcement or just not allow them.
Sure, I can produce some
You know.
graphs to show how much we've spent.
But I mean, my focus is dogs, but there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot of other categories, you know. I mean, we can look at each one of them. How many of the bonfire complaints are little grills in the back of somebody's pickup truck, you know?
Those are few and far between.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Any more old business? I had a couple of things that, one, all the new beach accesses that we were talking about, I mentioned that at the end of our last meeting. And were you gonna give us a little idea of that, or?
Yeah, so our one at Dune Allen, that we call Dune Allen Regional Beach Access, that's the two lots we bought directly across from Stinky's Restaurant. We're under design and permit. The TDC and BCC approved the conceptual design, and now the engineer is off on design development. We predict it'll take 8 to 12 months to get that design and permitted. It's in a category 2 or level 2 Chattahoochee Beach Mouse domain, so it requires some extra review by FWC and FWS. It'll have approximately 29 parking spaces a bathhouse similar to the one at Inlet Beach. It'll have a in and a out, U-shaped, access aisle, about half a dozen golf cart parking spaces, and enough room for probably 30 to 40 bikes. It'll be, the bathhouse is out by the road, so that people using the multi-use path on the north side of 38 can also have access to this bathhouse. We're looking at some more right-of-way parking in that area. The other pieces of property that we have purchased, the one at Amalfi Coast Resort area, we did what we call a quick fix to get it usable. So we went in and graded the right-of-way and put in some 8x8 parking boundary markers. They're not parking bumpers, but they kind of indicate a parking area. There's about 30 feet of right-of-way there that, you know, people can park in and somewhat successfully back out without having to back out onto the road. The existing gazebo and boardwalk are in poor shape. We stabilized it. It is by no means handicap accessible, but it does give access down onto the beach for people that want to use that particular access right now. We haven't put up any signage there. We will put up some signage there. We also have started a look at the property to the west of it. That property was made available to us for purchase. Jay is handling all that. We're in the review of getting appraisals on it, and then BCC will decide whether, TDC and BCC will decide if we want to purchase it. If we do, we'll probably use its infrastructure for the bathhouse. In other words, we'll tear down the superstructure, leave the foundations and the sewer, or water and sewer connections, electrical connections, and build appropriate sized bathhouse on it. Property down in 30A, across from Tom Thumb. We have not started anything on it. We will seek direction from the BCC to start conceptual design, and we'll go through the same format, and that is have a public workshop where we produce a conceptual design and then take public input and massage that conceptual design, seek approval from TDC and BCC to move forward on design development.
Which parcel is that? Is that the one with the low area where the little outfall is?
Yep, it's the one just to the east of Legacy Condominiums.
Okay.
So it's got some challenges. Probably require a good amount of stormwater systems on it. Quite possibly a small bridge or maybe a culvert, large culvert of some sort. And but it's it'll be a nice regional beach access. And so that's all the property we have, right? That's it. Yeah. So anyway, we through our property purchases and our other capital improvements, we've exhausted a lot of reserves that we've had. And so, I have a lot of bike path under design permit reconstruction. I have all of our existing regional beach accesses, and every beach access is getting what I call a facelift, new deck boards, new handrails. Those projects, what I budgeted, my budget was a little light, and so we're 90% complete of design and permit on the first group of them, and about 60% on the second group. We'll construct those as we can during off seasons. So obviously I can't do 62 beach access renovations in one winter, because we'll have to close down a bunch of them, and we still get people using them in the winter. So we'll do it over the next couple of off seasons. The money will be appropriated and stashed, and we'll do lots of them at a time. And there'll be, different frequencies, so that we're not closing down 5 beach accesses in Seagrove. The facelift, I predict that it'll take, 30 to 45 days to do the work once the construction work starts. And big undertaking. So, but anyway, short of it is a lot of the money we had in reserves that we could use for capital improvements, we've used it, or we've earmarked it. And so moving forward, it's going to be at a little bit slower pace. But when I got here, I felt my job was to get everything we had in good shape, And, when Jay got here, his mandate was to find new beach accesses, and he did a marvelous job of that. Now we've got to spend a bunch of money to improve it.
That's very good.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I love all the beach accesses.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are you all still putting those stencils on boardwalks?
Well, actually, we're using a routed, board technique now.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay,
we
yeah.
route the boards about 3/16 inch and then fill them with white epoxy. We did use colored, but we found out that sand gets them in it anyway. And so we just said, hey, why not just use the same color as the sand?
That's a good idea. And how far are you with that? Are you
All-
doing all of them?
All of our regional beach accesses have them. And we do have some at some select in neighborhood beach accesses.
Do you intend to do more
We
or?
do. They're very effective. It's a serial message, you know, and it's the core messages for beach rules and regulations.
Yeah, because that's a neat idea. It's very visible and I really like that.
We got a lot of good feedback from the
Yeah.
vinyl graphics we used. They didn't last, they didn't hold up, so Josh came up with this routed method. And it
Yeah,
works
it's
well.
brilliant.
Good job, Josh.
Yeah.
And what about names for your new beach accesses? How are you all doing on
Well,
that?
at the last TDC meeting, I introduced that we need to figure out how to name them. And I don't think there's an established format, so I just threw it out there as, let's be thinking about that. I did the same thing at the BCC meeting. You know, in the past, they've been named after a location, most of them. Edward Lane, of course, is named after an iconic guy from Chat Holly, you know, area. He was a builder on the beach in the, I guess, 50s and 60s. You know, I don't know how it's going to end up, to be honest with you. So all I asked was is that we'd be thinking about it. And if there is a means and methods, then let's use that. If there's not, and we have to establish one, let's do that. If it's just throw out names and make a vote, then we'll do that. So one of the things is this new, I think it was kind of decided on the new Dune Allen Regional Beach Access, that we call it Dune Allen, even though the one that we call Fort Panic, its formal name is Dune Allen Regional Beach Access. But everybody calls it Fort Panic because that's the name of the road that intersects 30A right there. And I think I have to go back and look at the meeting minutes, but I think at the last BCC meeting, I think it was somewhat decided that we would rename the original Dune Allen Regional Beach Access Fort Panic Beach Access. and name the new one Dune Allen Regional Beach Access. So,
Sweet.
anyway, I don't want to be the picker of names, so I threw it out there. I do believe one thing is we don't name them after people unless that person has passed on.
Maybe you can start naming them after offshore reefs or something. Whatever offshore reef is close by or.
I'm, like I say, I'm gonna leave that up to the,
Pat Potter, Dune Allen Regional Beach Access.
I'll leave that up to the,
Old school.
other people.
She's Dune Allen.
Yep.
Okay.
I had one other thing I saw on the news that we're putting beach mats out. At,
Oh, the Bobby man.
So-
We are trying to. FDEP is, very concerned.
yeah,
with
it
access
was it
maps.
temporary or permanent?
There seems to be a lot of confusion as to what they are, how they're being used, and how they will affect marine life.
Yeah.
We're working very hard to get it completed, the permitting process.
Is
And we think we're close. One thing we did is we did a countywide permit. Instead of a specific place permit, we told them we would like to do this in different locations, and it was suggested then that we apply for basically what is a countywide permit. And then whenever we want to install one, we would just simply send them the dimensions, our configuration layout to be added to that permit. Well, that's kind of been the problem, or not a problem. The biggest problem is that they have deemed it a permanent structure and are using permanent structure requirements to assess if they're going to permit this particular product. where we're trying to convince them that it's a temporary. Because we're gonna pick it up, periodically to shake the sand out of it. And, it's been permitted in places in South Florida. So it's not unique to Florida, it's somewhat unique to this division of FDEP in the Panhandle. But we'll get through it, and we'll get the match down there, and everybody will be happy.
I understand the purpose, obviously, but we're telling everybody else they gotta pick up all their stuff for the sea turtles, but we're gonna put mats down? That just doesn't seem like a good message.
We don't tell people they gotta pick up their boardwalks every night.
Well, but the boardwalk's only allowed 6 foot past the vegetation line. That's a permanent structure, and they gotta abide by the requirements, but, if we're gonna go by temporary requirements for a semi-permanent structure, I think it would affect the wildlife, the turtles in particular.
Well, like I say, the manufacturer had worked with FWC and FWS on what is the best configuration for it, and that configuration is a perpendicular, aisle, and then 45-degree offshoots on it, and that apparently doesn't affect the little turtles from getting into the water from the nesting site, and it doesn't affect the large turtles. The large turtles just climb right over it and find an appropriate nesting area. So, like I said, it's not what I would call it can be argued that it could affect the turtle in some form or fashion, but the mat manufacturer has worked with the regulatory agencies to figure out what is the best configuration for all concerned. And, handicapped people would also like to get on the beach. And so, do we say, no, you can't get on the beach because the marine turtle has precedent over you?
Well, I know over in Okaloosa County, it was a real hot issue. There was
Where?
Okaloosa County, Okaloosa Island, because there was a handicapped person out there that liked to frequent the beach, and but yeah, they bought the beach wheelchair.
And we have those at all of our regional beach accesses.
So there is access.
There is. Some people have a hard time transferring from their motorized wheelchair into that handicap accessible manual beach chair. And they would like to be able to come down at any time. Those chairs are available when there's lifeguards there. Lifeguards are there from March to October, David?
Yep, March 1st, September
So
30th.
after that, those chairs are only available if they contact us, prearrange, and all that. So what we're trying to do is afford a handicapped person the opportunity, if they're at their house on Saturday afternoon, mid-October, and would like to go enjoy a sunset, that they don't have to contact anybody. They can simply drive their car or van down there, get out of their handicap accessible van, traverse our handicap accessible boardwalk, and then traverse our handicap accessible mat, and be able to enjoy, whatever time of beach they would like to enjoy it. And, at 6 locations on our beach, regional beach accesses, I think that's a very small percentage of the 26 miles of beach that is available for sea turtle nesting. And while I certainly do appreciate marine life and the efforts that people put into it to protect it, we also have the same amount of responsibility to make our resources available to handicapped people. And I think there's not enough consideration for that at all. It truly is like the turtles take precedent over human beings. And, I think that, in every other aspect of our life, we cry for equality. And so why wouldn't we consider the same thing for this?
Oh, I agree. And I think our kind of turtle nesting is a little overblown anyway. In South Florida, it's, we get just fractions of the turtles, but it's still turtle habitat, and we need to protect it.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, the other alternative is, hey, let's build us a handicap accessible boardwalk down to the main high water line. Is that good for turtles? Certainly not. So what do? We seek out a solution that has been demonstrated, it doesn't affect turtles really that much.
I was real surprised to see it, on the news, and, I mean, to me, that's beach management. I didn't know why we didn't know about it before seeing it on the news. But, I mean, that's not really the point, but, I wondered how, DEP was gonna react to it, and if it was something that we could
A
permit.
destination improvement item, it was run through the rec committee.
Yeah,
Beach management had been consumed at the time with the end of the HSDR project when we originally started. This has been ongoing for, God, I don't know, how long have we been doing this, Josh? Beach access man, over a year. I mean, it took a while to get it approved, and then we had to reconfigure based on what turtle management people thought. And then FDEP, has said, oh, wait.
the people are gonna walk on them, because it's gonna be just so much easier than walking in the sand. And, I mean, I don't know how they're supported or staked down or whatever, but they start getting,
That's why I say it requires a little bit of maintenance, and we'll figure that out as we go along. We assume, every other week we'll have to pick them up, shake them out, and probably comb the beach a little bit to get them down level. But that's part of it. That's what we want to do, a pilot program to see how it works, how it's received, if it's used, and we'll make a decision on the rest of them after that.
I think your points were really well said, and I think we should try to help accomplish that.
Yeah. Anyway, next.
Anyone else have any comments? How about the public? Anybody in the public have any comments? Okay, that's it. Meeting's adjourned.
Appreciate it.
What, to adjourn?